301-230-0980 is the phone number on a Vibe Check Tuesday. How has this first loss of the Commanders season affected your optimism for 2023? Anthony, you ready to go to the phones?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's go to the phones, and let's start off with Bill in Upper Marlboro. Bill, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Doing well.
My perspective hasn't changed anyway. I'm kind of glad that they had a game like this early in the season and not late in the season. But my point is there's still no tape on Sam Howell that the teams coming up can use as a viable game plan. If you put pressure on him and sack him, that takes all the pressure off the secondary. And I think the league is scared to death of the receivers on the Commanders. The only way you're going to stop him is put the pressure on him. If they change the pressure and protect him, I think he'll be fine. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Bill. I'm going to disagree with the idea that there isn't tape on Sam that is usable for the simple reason that the Bills found some things on tape that they thought were usable. They were very clear about it after the game. I saw a number of quotes making their way from the Bills locker room to your favorite Commanders reporters' Twitter pages, etc. And I don't know how much of these have been distributed en masse beyond Twitter. Like, if you're not on there, did you see them? Did you hear about them? But the basic crux was, like, we being the Bills defense, knew that Sam Howell was going to stay on his first read for a lot longer, and especially on third down. Like, he's going to stick with that first read. He's going to hold the ball because he's going to try to do stuff down the field. Like, it's great that Sam's not afraid to try to push the ball down the field, but at the end of the day, like, there's only so much you can do that, especially if your offensive line isn't the Eagles' O-line or the Niners' O-line. Like, if you have super elite offensive line play, fine. But if you have, like, good or average NFL line play, which, to be clear, is what the Commanders are getting. If you want to get hung up on real easy, just tell me the O-line stinks. I'm not telling you it's good, but, like, it doesn't stink. They gave this dude over 3 seconds to throw. They're top 10 in the NFL in time to throw. Like, they're giving Sam time. If he stands back there and holds the ball longer, that's on him, or it's on the receivers to either be getting open and win their one-on-one matchups, or being more on top of the details to be where they need to be on time. There's one play that we talk about on Take Command that Logan says he thinks if Jahan Dotson's split is 2 yards closer to the ball to start the line of scrimmage, like if he's not so wide, then he's able to run a crossing route actually across the field into Sam's vision on time. Instead, he's not really in the progression because he can't get there because he starts 6 feet to the left of where he's supposed to be. 6 feet on a football field is a long way. And that extra half second that it would take to cover that is enough to be the difference in a sack or a completion. That's the margins we're talking about in the league. And so Sam's got to speed it up. And whether that's getting the ball out to checkdowns quicker, whether that's getting out to run quicker, whether it's throwing the ball over dudes' heads quicker, he just can't stand back there for this long. And I think that is very well documented on tape. So, Bill, I appreciate the call. I just disagree with the idea that there isn't tape yet on Sam Howell of something that's usable for defensive teams and defensive coordinators because the Bills just did it. 301-230-0980. Back to the A-Slot listener line. Let's go to our guy, Lap. Lap, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show. Lap. Come on, man. Lap. Anthony, Lap calls how many shows per day?
Lap is a frequent caller. I'm surprised he wasn't, ready.
Slipping. Our guy calls like every show every day, and he wasn't ready. Can't be doing that. All right, let's try again. Let's go to David in Bethesda. All right, David, you're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, what's up? I've listened to you every day on the way home from work. Never called because I'm afraid of getting roasted by your unparalleled logic. However, I'm optimistic looking into the season for 2 reasons. Reason number one is that we spent weeks leading up to this to Game 1 predicting what the season schedule would look like by the end of it. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the median was like 8-1 or 10-7. And when you glance through the schedule, the Bills were one of those games that we almost kind of knew was going to be or expected to be a loss. And reason number 2 is that the late, great Vince Lombardi once said, there's no such thing as losing. You either win or you learn. And that's a good lesson to this is a good game to learn from heading into the remainder 75% of the season.
If Lombardi said
That's
there's
all I got
winning,
for you.
yeah, no, David, that's a great call. You don't have nothing to be afraid of. Those are great points. I will ask though, since you have some knowledge bank of Lombardi quotes, who is it? If Lombardi said there's winning and learning, who is it that said there's winning and misery? That's also a famous one.
I've heard you say that plenty of times, so I'm going to say you coined it.
Oh, okay. Well, I get credit for that very famous quote that I absolutely was not the origin of. All right, David, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Anthony, let's look this up real quick. There's winning and there's misery. I thought, it's Parcells, which honestly kind of tracks. Parcells seems like he's a pretty miserable guy. Like he just seems kind of old and curmudgeon-y.
Yeah, I don't know.
Parcells is before your time, huh?
I
mean, a lot.
I know of him, but I couldn't recall like how he was as a coach, to be honest. Like,
all right, you can go watch some NFL films.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to kick Anthony back out of here, and we're going to send him back to the NFL films side of things. All right, let's go one more for this segment, but if you're on hold now and I don't call your name and click on you here, don't go anywhere because we're going to take more calls coming up at 4:30 as well, so keep them coming, 301-230-0980 on that Ace Law listener line. Let's go to Montana in D.C. Montana, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
What's going on, gentlemen? Thank you so much for taking my phone call. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. So thank you again. Yeah, definitely I'm optimistic. One thing I want to say is, Bieniemy is definitely not an idiot, obviously. He's a former running back, former two-time Super Bowl champion. So a lot of callers are talking about, they need to run the ball. That's obvious. So I just think I'm optimistic because I think, this previous game, he's going to definitely, have a more balanced attack. Because I think what you guys, no one has really mentioned, the reason why they're throwing the ball so much is because they're trying to get, a quick score because they've been so behind under Ron Rivera. They're always behind. So they're trying to, quickly pass the ball, trying to get a quick score so they don't fall behind. So the defense doesn't, try to have any issues like that. So I think that's the reason. So hopefully this past game, they'll have more of a balanced attack. So I'm definitely optimistic. Thank you so much for taking my phone call.
You got it, Montana. Thanks. That's a good call. I don't think that they were super rushed based off the score. They have been behind, but it hasn't been like out of reach. I just think Bieniemy thinks passing's like he's learned from Andy. Like passing's the way to go. But I think the biggest thing that he's got to adjust to is like Logan and I talk about this a lot. And this is a term that I picked up from Logan. He's very smart. He knows a lot about pass protection. Because even though he's a tight end, like he was a blocking tight end who got called in to pass protect a lot. Like Logan spent parts of his career blocking guys on the edge, like a Michael Strahan or some of the great Giants guys of that early 2010s era. Brandon Graham at the Eagles. Like he spent a lot of time against a lot of really, really good defensive ends and is part of O-lines and pass protection units that have had to do this. And he's coached O-line at the high school level, et cetera. But he talks a lot about insulating offensive linemen and making it so that their task is not nearly as hard. And a guy like Andrew Wiley needs a little bit of insulation. Andrew Wiley is not a bad football player. He's not even below average as a right tackle in the NFL. But he's not great. It's just Bieniemy in Kansas City was able to protect him, keep him out of really bad spots, keep defenses guessing, not let defenses pin their ears back. And the biggest difference is Patrick Mahomes is a wizard at turning pressures into positive plays. And Sam Howell, at this stage, is the worst quarterback in the NFL, statistically speaking. This is not me making a judgment. This is not projecting forward. This is just this season so far, statistically, the worst quarterback in the league at turning pressures into sacks. 39% of pressures, according to Pro Football Focus, end in sacks for Sam Howell. That's the worst in the league. The next guy's in the low 30%. So he's the worst, and he's the worst by a decent little margin. Patrick Mahomes is under 3% He's at like 2.6. That is ridiculous. So that means for every 100 dropbacks that there's pressure, 30 plus of them will be sacks on Sam Howell that are not on Patrick Mahomes. And that's something as a play caller that you need to consider heavily. And that is not just what you're doing in terms of the play action game and how you chip and whether you go max protect, whether you roll the pocket, where you roll the pocket. It's also how much you run versus pass the football, period. And that's something that I think Bieniemy is going to take a little bit to adapt to. And if he doesn't, this season is going to be very long and very painful for Sam Howell, or Sam is going to get better at it, or they'll make that adjustment. And both things can happen at once. Sam can get better and EB can adjust. But that stat is looming large in my head right now, especially with a very good Eagles defensive line coming to town. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, we will talk more with you on a Vibe Check Tuesday. Has this loss affected your optimism at all? 301-230-0980. Your call's next. It is a Vibe Check Tuesday. So what's the vibe amongst the Commanders fan base? We check in after each and every game. And this one, we're checking in after what on the scoreboard was a very bad loss, 37-3. So has that affected your optimism for the 2023 season? Right back to the phones we go. Thanks to everyone who held on through the break, starting with Cliff. Cliff, thanks for calling as always. You are on the H-Law listener line on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, what's going on, Craig?
What's up, Cliff?
Nah, I'm still optimistic. It's early in the season. No need to panic right now, but I'm looking side-eyed at Ron Rivera. He was a linebacker with the Chicago Bears. I'm quite sure he knows some defensive schemes from back in the days of Chicago when he played with Chicago under Buddy Ryan. Him and Jack Del Rio both were defensive players. When they were players, they were both linebackers. And I seen where the Bears used to use that famous 46 defense that would get to the quarterback before he's ready to throw the ball. He's either sacked or he got to throw the ball before a receiver even get open. They don't have to do it every time, but why don't they dial up some of those exotic blitzes like that? Because I noticed in the Denver game, Jack Del Rio dialed up some blitzes, but on Sunday I didn't really see no blitzes.
So, Cliff, it's a great question, and I'm gonna let you listen offline to the answer. One, specifically to the 46, that's kind of what the Cinco front is. It's a little bit different, but like a lot of the alignments, Kendrick Golston was talking about this last week when he was on the show with us. So if you missed that, definitely go back and listen to Ked in the podcast feed from I think that was last Thursday. Or check out it's just easier probably to find, frankly, on YouTube. So go to my YouTube page at Craig Hoffman, or the Team 980's YouTube page, and we got our interview with Kendrick Golston up there. But he talked about how the 46 or the Cinco front, the way the Commanders run it with the 5-down linemen, have very similar splits and alignments, and they create real challenges for an offense. So they did use that some for sure on Sunday. Let me see if I can pull up the PFF snap counts real quick and see just how much John Ridgway played. But in terms of exotic blitzes, like that leaves you exposed on the back end. And I think they would prefer to get home with 4 players or occasionally 5. And they trust that their back end can cover and their front can get pressure. And they just did not play well. Like at the end of the day, there's no scheme that can overcome players not playing well. And I think that's the important thing to remember when you talk about, Chase Young's day, or Montez Sweat only gets 1 pressure. John Allen, pretty quiet day. Deron Payne Deron Payne's playing out of his mind right now. But I mean, Allen, solid day, but like not great. Payne makes some impact plays, but like nobody really got great pressure. And by the way, when they did blitz, Cam Curl runs right past Josh Allen, and Josh runs past him the other way for a touchdown. So they did bring some pressure, and the problem is Allen is so good and so difficult to bring down, and he's so mobile that it just tends to leave you exposed on the back end, and you'd almost rather him beat coverage. But the problem is you have to then rush with discipline, and they didn't. By the way, John Ridgway played 20 of 68 snaps, so you do the math, that's a little less than a third there in that Cinco front on Sunday, assuming that all of his snaps came in that formation, probably a little less. So, a quarter, a fifth, somewhere in there of the snaps in Cinco. Some of that becomes time and score dependent as well. Yada, yada. 301-230-0980. Let's go to Vaughn on the Ace Law listener line. Vaughn, thanks for calling. Thanks for holding. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Thank you. Thanks for taking my call, though. One of the things I want to say I'm optimistic about is that, look, they had, to all the things that were happening in the game, they held them to 16 points all the way to almost the end of the third quarter. So that's one of the optimisms that I have about the team. But one of the other things I want to try to address is that sometimes I think what confuses me, sometimes I think we get out coached and get out schemed. Sometimes players win games, and sometimes the team and the coaches have to win games too. I think it's a combination of both. We got a young quarterback, so Buffalo, what they did, I think was a blessing in disguise, and I hope their ego don't get in the way as far as understanding that whole situation. And we need to make adjustments to what we need to do that will work for our young quarterback. And I think that what would work would have been the crossing patterns. When they blitzing like that, you got to at least have them thinking or be double thinking about, okay, I'm blitzing, but they come in with these crossing patterns and the screens, I think, would have kind of subside.
So, Vaughn, I'm going to stop you right there because I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding of what happened there. If that's what you took away, they weren't blitzing. They were getting pressure with 4. Occasionally 5, but rarely ever any more than that. So they're dropping off in 7 in coverage, and a lot of those crossers and things are covered. So, like, I think there are some schematic adjustments that could have been made, and there's some missed opportunities, but that's football. I just think at the end of the day, like, Sam's got to play better. And that's not me saying, like, Sam stinks. How could they possibly play him? Like, he's a young player in his 4th career start, and he got by a really good defense. And I think it's one of those games that a lot of the stuff that happened, I just look at it and go, those other dudes are real good, and they get paid too.
But the linebackers is dropping back deep.
On some of it.
Yeah, they seem like they were. You absolutely right with your assessment, but from some of what I've seen, the linebackers is like they was dropping deep, and some of that comes with the way the patterns, the scheme was running.
They were, and Vaughn, I appreciate the call. I got to let you go because I got one more that I want to get to. There definitely are times where that's happening. There was a lot of like longer developing concepts that I think were called, and some of that is they're attacking some of those intermediate short, like long short, if you will, like the end of what we call short range, the beginning of what we call intermediate with like curls and things like that, hook routes, digs, things that are, a little bit shorter than maybe a dig. A dig is typically, that's a longer in-breaking route, but whatever they want to call in this offense, an in, a 10-yard in on Madden, right? And those are not happening in the same way that are like shallow crosses and things like that. So they attack it a little bit different way, and the linebackers are sinking underneath it. I also think that there's times where they are calling some of that stuff, and the linebackers are on it. Like that layer of the Bills' defense is very, very good. Bernard and Milano are incredible football players, and so it's hard. I do think some of the crossers and stuff can be helpful certainly for a young quarterback. Anything you can get over the ball that's really easy to see. But I think part of the problem was there's some of that stuff available and checkdowns and things like that if Sam just gets the ball in the playmaker's hands quickly, you can have some big plays. And instead, he's trying to push it down the field, so he's waiting, and then it's like, oh, crap, the deeper down the field thing isn't available. Let me check back short. Oh, no, I'm getting sacked because it's now been 3.5 seconds. All right, last but not least, let's go to Rod. Rod, thanks for holding. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for taking my call. So I'm listening to what you're saying. Man, at the end of the day, my optimism has changed. I thought 10-7 at one point, but after watching Sunday's game, I thought we might lose. But after watching Sunday's game, I realized, man, there's levels to this stuff. The Commanders is just not that the Commanders can play with. Then there's other teams they can't. And I just think that talent level, their receivers, I like McLaurin, but I don't know where the heck Dotson at. I just think their talent level whether it be quarterback, offensive line, defensive line, running back, safeties, their talent level. I mean, they got number one picks and local names to us. But when they play against these good teams, man, these good teams normally beat them bad. So to me, it's just levels to this stuff. They just not on that level. And as I look at their schedule, they got a lot of teams on their schedule. They just not on their level. So I'm thinking, I'm thinking maybe 6-11, 7-10, because they just not on certain teams' level. And when they play these teams that levels that they not on, they typically get beat. And the last thing I'm gonna say is, even when I look at the Giants, the Giants, Daniel Jones hasn't lost to the Redskins yet. Because it's something about
we are the Commanders.
Our front four, or the Commanders, whatever. Daniel Jones is undefeated against these guys. So it's like.
All right, Vaughn, we got to let you run. You're making great points. We're just up against the clock, so I appreciate the call. I'm not trying to be rude. It's just we got radio rules that we got to follow. Let me just say this real quick. The turnovers in this game make it so that the Commanders are not on the Bills' level. They competed with them toe-to-toe, despite the turnovers, for the better part of 3 quarters. The Gibson fumble, although not the most egregious turnover on the day in terms of direct results, the pick 6 is that. The Gibson fumble is such a backbreaker because the defense stands up, does its job, gets a 4th down stop, gets a turnover on downs, and Gibson literally on the next play gives it back. And at the end of the day, these are human beings, and the emotional letdown that is, you just go, they're about to get scored on, and sure enough, they did. Are they on the Bills' level? No. But the gap is not 37-3. And I think that we will see that this weekend against Philadelphia. If we don't, and they have the same exact problems, that's a different story. But I do think that what you're seeing is, yes, a talent gap, but also an age and experience gap. And you talk about a guy like Dotson. We talk about all the young guy mistakes that Sam makes. Now we need to give him grace. There's some of that going on, I think, with Jahan in year 2 as well. A new offense. B-Rob's in year 2 in a new offense. Everybody's in a new offense. And there's going to be days in the NFL where you just get your ass kicked, especially by a team that's better than you. But there's also going to be days where you don't give yourself the best shot for any number of reasons. And I think what happened on Sunday, while certainly not acceptable and A-OK, is perfectly explainable, especially given the timing of the turnovers and how costly they were because of where they were on the field, where they were in time and score situations, where they were down and distance situations, and the fact that one of them was a pick 6.
This is the Hoffman Show on the T980 and the Odyssey app.